A bittersweet moment as friends and followers of Will Roberts and his family showed up as they returned home to Tuscaloosa County.
I feel like everybody does through Facebook and through all of their social media outreach. We do know them, even though we haven't personally met them.
Seeing the community come out here and support them during this time, how could we not?
Cheyenne Burton was one of many who followed Will as he documented the good, bad, and ugly of his battle with bone cancer. She says after a cancer scare with her own child, the story hits close to home.
Seeing Will come out of his shell and he gave his life to the world. You don't realize everything that children go through until you're in that moment and in that set. And I was one of the lucky ones that got to walk out.
Will fought a courageous battle with cancer and died at just 15 years old. Monday, his community celebrated his bravery and how his short time on Earth has brought them all a little closer.
They live in our community, and their story had a touch on everybody's heart.
They have made such an impact that they have all made a point to make awareness and make sure that everybody is praying. It's amazing. Look what God has done, all because of him.
It just got dark and windy. It rained so bad that you couldn't even see out your window.
Communities across the Northeast slammed with violent storms Tuesday.
I just hunkered down. My dog is very scared of the thunder.
Some parts of the region were forecast to possibly get more than a month's worth of rain through the night. Flash flood watches were in effect for tens of millions of people, from Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey, as well as parts of New England, down to Maryland, where street flooding in Baltimore was bad enough to leave cars partially submerged. The high water got so bad in some areas that crews had to carry out rescues, including in the town of Coalport, Pennsylvania, where 3 people and 2 dogs had to be rescued from a home. The destructive weather pushed further south, too, with storms powerful enough to send a massive tree crashing into this house in the Washington, D.C. area. The storm threat stretched even farther south into the Carolinas, where the rain was so heavy in Charlotte that it completely obscured the skyline for a time. Elsewhere in the state, a City of Asheville public meeting was put on hold for a tornado warning and evacuation. It comes as communities in the Midwest are still reeling from storms that struck earlier in the week. The National Weather Service confirming that at least 4 tornadoes hit the Chicago area Monday. I'm Reed Binion reporting.
The mystery surrounding Mitch McConnell's health is now leading to questions on if the longtime senator is even alive.
I think that at a certain point we have to be asking where he is.
We're hopeful that he can get back soon.
The Kentucky senator's office posted a new photo Monday of him in the hospital with his wife, saying he is, quote, working hard to return to the Senate. But Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear is not convinced.
All we're asking is just a little bit of proof. And I get that everybody wants a certain level of privacy, but when you run for these jobs, you know you're giving some of that up.
On Monday, Beshear wrote a letter to McConnell's office asking the former GOP leader to, quote, provide proof of your capacity to serve or resign.
I hope he gets back soon, and I'd be surprised if he's not back in a few weeks. I think we might even see him if there were a really important close vote.
Mitch McConnell is set to retire in January, and his seat is up for grabs this November. But if he were to resign by Monday, the Kentucky governor could call for a special election to replace him for the remainder of his term.
Democrats politically ought to be happy the Republicans are down a vote, but the governor raises a legitimate concern for his shared constituents with McConnell. Are you representing them or not?
And we're told that Senator McConnell is now out of the hospital and in a rehab facility, but is still not, quote, medically cleared to return. Governor Beshear is now asking Senate Majority Leader Thune to investigate McConnell's condition. And New York, Caroline Elliott, Fox News.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer. I respectfully decline to answer. I respectfully decline to answer.
That's pretty much all Dr. Anthony Fauci had to say Wednesday during a contentious Senate hearing on his response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Committee Chairman Rand Paul tried to ask about funding gain-of-function research at a lab in Wuhan, China, and other biolabs, but every question was met with the same answer.
I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
It's against the law to obstruct an investigation of Congress. There will be repercussions to your refusal to testify today.
During Dr. Fauci's brief opening statement, he accused Paul of being obsessed with seeing him charged over the pandemic response.
The sole reason he is calling me before this committee is to get me to say something, anything, that could vindicate his repeated public pledges that I end up, in his words, quote, behind bars, unquote.
Over the weekend, Paul released Fauci's detailed diary from the pandemic years, where he appeared thrilled with the public attention he was getting, but also admitted some COVID mandates like school closures, lockdowns, and masks were doing little to stop the spread of the virus.
Did you literally lie to your own diary?
I respectfully decline to answer.
Democrats in the hearing were mostly supportive of Fauci invoking his Fifth Amendment right not to answer questions, even though Fauci received a protective pardon from former President Biden before he left office. In Washington, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
I served at the NIH for over 54 years, 38 of those as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Over that period, I proved that I believe in and respect the value of legitimate congressional oversight. In fact, I testified before and/or briefed Senate and House Senate and House committees well over 200 times over those 38 years. However, given Senator Paul's obvious obsession with calling for my prosecution, his repeated slanderous comments about me, and recently his publicly releasing my unredacted personal diary aimed at embarrassing and intimidating me, the only conclusion I can reach is that the sole reason he is calling me before this committee is to get me to say something, anything, that could vindicate his repeated public pledges that I end up, in his words, quote, behind bars, unquote. Any reasonable person who has followed his unhinged obsession with me would readily come to the same conclusion. Therefore, although it pains me to do so, because of the respect I have for the legislative branch of government and my decades-long record of cooperating with Congress, under the advice of my attorneys, I will invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution to refrain from answering your questions. Thank you.
I just left Florida State Prison near Stark, where earlier today, 2 men were executed on the same day for the first time in about 60 years in this state. The first execution today was James R. Duckett. He was scheduled to be executed at noon, but because of some delays with the final appeals in the Supreme Court, it got pushed back to about 1 o'clock. He had been convicted of raping and murdering an 11-year-old girl while he was a police officer at a small town in Central Florida. The second execution, which occurred at 6 p.m., was Dominic Ochicon. He was convicted of murdering his ex-girlfriend's parents, and both of these crimes happened in the 80s.
Every time we came down here, she was a sweet little girl. That man was on patrol in a patrol car, and he did this in uniform. You teach children to go to cops for help. This man had no right to do what he did. And it really screwed me up as a child, because now, as a child, I thought all cops are bad. As an adult, I realized it's not all cops, it's some cops. This man took advantage of his badge.
Ochicon had originally been scheduled to be the only execution on this date, but Duckett had actually been scheduled earlier this year in March to be executed, but there was a stay due to some DNA testing, and that stay was finally lifted earlier this month, and Governor Ron DeSantis decided to reschedule that execution to this date. So that's why this is the first time we've had 2 executions on the same date in Florida in a really long time.
The pause in fighting is now over. After 4 relatively quiet days, Iran launched a surprise attack on U.S. forces in the Middle East. CENTCOM says all the incoming missiles were intercepted. And President Trump tells Fox News Iran is, quote, going to get a beating.
We want those negotiations to go on, but if Iran is not going to honor our opportunity to bring peace and stability to the region, the United States will take action.
The attack came as Iran rejected the latest ceasefire proposal from Oman, which called for joint control over the Strait of Hormuz. Iran claims it didn't address their national security concerns.
We need to have sufficient oversight until we can be confident that lasting peace has been established.
But that's a non-starter for the U.S. And on Wednesday, Iran says it attacked 3 tankers trying to pass through the strait, raising questions about whether the diplomatic process is working.
We'll have negotiations. You stop firing on us. They may say that, but that doesn't mean they're not going to intimidate and coerce and control the straits.
Meanwhile, President Trump is reportedly close to widening the war, hoping to bring the Iranians back to the bargaining table.
We're going to have to ratchet up to get out of this strategic cul-de-sac. I think the United States is going to have to launch escalatory strikes.
The U.S. and Saudi Arabia also struck Iran-backed Iraqi militias that have targeted U.S. forces and the Saudis. In Tel Aviv, Trey Yingst, Fox News.
Ukrainian troops escalating attacks on Russian oil refineries overnight. This past week, they also launched multiple strikes on warehouses belonging to Russia's biggest online retailer called Wildberries.
Ukraine is exceeding our expectations. And what we now need to do is for Putin to end the bloodbath and to come to the negotiating table.
It comes as Kyiv ramps up its economic and diplomatic pressure on Moscow. On Tuesday, Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky met with President Trump at the White House. In an interview with Axios, Zelensky says he asked for an emergency package of Patriot air defense interceptors to defend against attacks on energy infrastructure.
Each 3-6 months, we have to change technologies. We have to be quicker than Putin.
In a separate meeting, Zelensky told Washington lawmakers that Ukraine is making gains on the battlefield but needs more help from the U.S. That night, the Senate took its first steps towards passing a bipartisan Russian sanctions bill. It would penalize countries that continue to buy Russian oil, gas, and other exports.
This bill says to Vladimir Putin, your days of war are numbered. You are on the losing side. Better to come to the table now.
The momentum is in the Ukrainians' favor, but winter's coming on in just a few months, and there's much more to do.
This month, President Trump said he would also give Kyiv a license to produce Patriots to counter Russian attacks. In London, Greg Malcott, Fox News.
As the summer wraps up, college students are getting ready for a new academic year. Many of them are looking ahead to the finish line and may be unsure of what's on the other side. That's why business experts are warning about the U.S. workforce, noting that some young professionals are struggling with the workload.
They're asked to kind of look like they have all of the answers, while at the same time learning and developing their competencies.
And that's not all. Professor Emily Blum says young workers are finding themselves having to juggle multiple tasks and make major decisions, like choosing between working on their own projects and helping the larger team. And although it can feel like a juggling act, Blum says young workers may need to get used to the idea and work on finding their balance.
So I think something that's really important to think about is that these tensions, these competing demands are just a part of the way that organizations work. You really can't just pick one thing.
Blum says the burden doesn't only fall on young workers, but employers can help out by doing their part too. Preparing newbies to make major decisions can help them become more confident workers, which can ultimately be good for business.
If you're going to expect a young team member to take a leadership role, they really need the information to make decisions.
Blum also says managers can take away some of the guesswork for new employees by communicating expectations for job performance and the reasons behind why certain decisions are made. I'm Marianne Rafferty, Fox News.
Higher costs and sluggish sales weigh on a household product maker's bottom line. Procter & Gamble's earnings for the recent quarter are mixed. The maker of Pampers, Luvs, Gillette, Olay Skincare, and many other brands reported better than expected earnings, though business was down from a year ago. Ford's outlook is improving. Its electric vehicle business lost about $1.3 billion in the recent quarter, but Ford made a profit in the period and is raising expectations for the year. Ford builds the most cars and trucks in the U.S. and exports the most as well. Meanwhile, BMW says it could be cutting around 8,000 jobs in Germany, though the cuts will not involve car production. Its car sales slumped 30% in China in the recent quarter. And French luxury group Hermès reported improved sales, though investors are looking at a continued slump in luxury sales in China. The Parisian fashion house makes the Birkin bag, and demand for luxury accessories has been in a slump for years, particularly in China. Analysts at Bernstein say Chinese companies are competing with French brands. CJ Papa, Fox News.
It's a once-daily pill now approved as a treatment, along with diet and exercise for adults with high levels of LDL cholesterol.
This has been exciting for us to have an added tool in our toolbox in the way we care for our patients that need it most.
Dr. Lakshmi Mehta with The Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center says in clinical trials, Lipfendra lowered LDL in study participants by an average of about 60%. But she says research is still underway to see if that, in turn, reduces risk of heart attacks and strokes, which can happen when high levels of LDL cholesterol build up on the walls of blood vessels.
The new medication kind of helps avoid degradation of the LDL receptors, which allows more LDL or bad cholesterol to be removed from the bloodstream.
Mehta says the new pill may be a good option for people who can't tolerate statins or those who are already on statins but can't get LDL levels low enough. The most common side effects were dizziness and diarrhea, and Mehta says patients should weigh the risks and benefits based on what's right for them.
This new pill, at least from we've preliminarily heard from Merck, will be a little over $10 a pill, so about $300+ a month. And they're anticipating it to be even lower direct out-of-pocket pay that patients would have to pay.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
As millions of Americans spend time outdoors this summer, dermatologists are bringing attention to a startling trend. Young people are ditching sunscreen, and at the same time, they're embracing tanning, both indoors and out.
The younger generation doesn't seem to be fearful or maybe even aware of the risks of tanning and long-term UV radiation.
Now, skin specialists are reminding their patients about the potential risks for cancer.
Repeated and long-term exposure to the sun and to ultraviolet radiation causes skin cancer.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says ultraviolet radiation can be emitted by both natural sources like the sun and artificial ones too, like tanning beds. Also noting people should protect themselves from overexposure.
Avoid tanning, wear your sunscreen, but also get established with a dermatologist.
And the risks aren't all about health. Experts warning there are some cosmetic drawbacks too.
If you're tanning in your 20s, you will pay for it in your 40s and 50s in the presence of fine wrinkles, deep wrinkles, sunspots, age spots, and increased redness or leathery appearance of the skin.
But there are some safer ways to achieve the look without all the risks.
Self-tanners are a safe and effective way of getting a tanned and bronzed look.
And a reminder from dermatologists, although self-tanners are a good alternative to soaking up UV rays, sunscreen is still needed to protect the skin. I'm Marianne Rafferty, Fox News.
Oi, welcome back. It's good to see you.
You too.
The first trailer is out for the new season of Ted Lasso. Jason Sudeikis' title character returns to Richmond, this time to coach a second division women's team. Plenty of new faces join the returning cast members when season 4 of Ted Lasso debuts August 5th.
But football is life?
No, life is so much more than football.
Not as catchy, but true.
This is the kind of movie I love. This is the kind of movie that made me want to be in the business.
Olivia Wilde has her stars for the next movie she'll direct, the comedy Naughty. Jennifer Aniston will play a mother trying to win custody of her son from her slimy soon-to-be ex by convincing Santa Claus to testify at her divorce hearing. Emmy winner Peter Dinklage suits up to play Kris Kringle. Naughty is due in theaters November 7th, 2027. In Hollywood, I'm David Daniel.
Hey, everyone.
Tom Holland made his big screen Spider-Man debut in 2016's Captain America: Civil War, introducing the web-slinger into the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
This is my chance to prove myself.
2017 saw Holland suit up for his own movie, Spider-Man: Homecoming.
You said save the wizard!
In 2018, Holland found himself blasting off in Avengers: Infinity War, turned to dust by Thanos, and brought back for the climax of Avengers: Endgame in 2019.
You gonna be the next Iron Man now?
Well, no, I don't have time. I'm too busy doing your jobs.
What? Mere months after the events of Endgame, Holland was back in theaters in Spider-Man: Far From Home.
I've only had 1 week where my life has felt normal.
In 2021, Holland's Spidey came face to face with Tobey Maguire's and Andrew Garfield's wall crawlers in Spider-Man: No Way Home, and had a mid-credits cameo in Venom: Let There Be Carnage.
I promised you that I would keep you safe. Please, you just have to trust me.
5 years later, Holland is back in Spider-Man: Brand New Day, with the world still unaware who the hero under the mask is. In Hollywood, I'm Rick Damigella.
Terrifying video shows the moment a shark attacked a diver in the blink of an eye. Henry Gibbs was spearfishing off Fiji when he says he spotted a gray reef shark doing semicircles beneath him before suddenly surging at him and latching onto his leg, dragging him in what's known as a death roll. He was pulled from the water by friends and later treated in Fiji. He has since been flown to New Zealand and, following several surgeries, is expected to make a full recovery. Gibbs says his big mistake was underestimating the shark because of its size, but he says he feels lucky to have survived the horrifying ordeal. Another scary situation courtesy of Mother Nature, this one in Wisconsin, where a driver caught in the middle of an intense storm suddenly found herself caught in the middle of 2 downed power poles.
I thought I was a goner.
Autumn Willett told WLUK the weather around Appleton changed in an instant, and before she could get off the road,
Poles just snapped and came down on both sides of my vehicle.
Willett says she rode out the storm waiting for help, which came roughly 45 minutes later. She escaped unscathed, and her car suffered only scratches and a missing mirror. Finally, this last one is also crazy, but could have been avoided. A suspect's joyride in a stolen backhoe was caught on camera in San Diego, California. Witnesses told KGTV the man drove the construction vehicle, sparks a-flying, knocking down street signs, a street light, and trees, all while shirtless. Damage to one business is estimated around $25,000. Police say the man was arrested and charged with theft of a vehicle and property damage. For Take a Look at This, I'm Jeremy Rod.
Towering over the Cheshire countryside, the world's largest radio telescope nears completion. Radio waves.
The magnitude of these cuts was absolutely shocking. I talked to all our staff this morning. They were stunned, to be honest. We knew that SGFC were saying that there might be 10% cuts across the range of projects that they do. So to hear this morning, and we only had the official letter this morning, that our funding was being completely cut from 2028 was a real blow.
£300,000, and that's a lot cheaper than a spaceship.
The Russians have succeeded in breaking the barrier which binds man to Earth, and the path is now open for them to explore the solar system. And I believe that in the next 5 or 7 years, the Russians will fulfill their 7-year plan for science, in which they intend to make a landing of a human being on the moon.
Your wife is in a bar, you said she's under it.
This is what he's going to tell you.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir. The only thing they could do was kill him.
The jury to find the defendant